Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going to be diving into a topic that every guitarist can relate to, strings. Now whether you're an acoustic player, an electric player, strings are obviously going to be a very important thing to you, and it's crucial to choose the right strings, of course, for the sound that you want. Now, obviously, all the different strings are going to give you a different sound, and, you might want different sounds for different genres and everything. And I'm not going to go too deep into that in this video, whether, these strings are the best for metal, these are the best for rock, these are the best for country, blues, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to kind of give you the basics of, what are the best overall strings, and also I'll let you know on how often you should restring your guitars, based off of both my personal experiences and just kind of some research that I've been doing lately. And I'll leave the links down to those websites down in the description below. And also, back to the whole genre thing, if you have any questions about further detail, feel free to go down in the comments below, and I'll gladly do my best to answer those questions for you. Without further ado, let's get right into the video. So starting off today's video, we're going to do acoustic strings. Now these first strings are considered the best overall strings based on the research that I did, and honestly I agree with them. These strings are great. They're the Elixir Nano Web Phosphor Bronze acoustic strings. I have these strings on my Ibanez, and as soon as I restring my Taylor, I'm going to put those ones on. They're great strings. They're coated, so that comes with a bunch of benefits. It makes them last longer, makes them feel better on your fingers, and they sound really good. One thing that you can kind of run into with a coated string sometimes is that the coating will kind of deaden your sound a little bit. It'll just make it not sound as true to the guitar, I guess. But these strings are thin enough, or the coating is thin enough, that it doesn't really do that, but they still feel just really nice on your fingers. And the only real downside, I'd say, to these strings are that they're expensive. They definitely are not the cheapest strings out there, but honestly, if you don't really love restringing too often, or you just want your strings to last longer in general, it's worth paying more money for it. So I'd highly recommend those strings. Okay, so the next strings up on the list are supposedly the best beginner strings, and they are the D'Addario EJ16 acoustic strings. They're really good because they're good value for money. They're not the most expensive strings, so but they're also not so cheap that they're just going to be garbage. They're good quality for what you pay for. Also, being D'Addario, they have a really wide range of gauges, so whether you want a thinner gauge or a thicker gauge, they've probably got the gauge for you. The downside about them is that they aren't the longest lasting strings, but really that's not a huge deal, especially if you don't mind changing strings too often, then it's really not a problem. Next up on the list for good finger picking strings are the Martin Retro strings. Now, these strings have a good reputation of being really warm strings. They're a lot warmer than a lot of other strings out of the box, and they're also a good value. The only real downside that really is just based on your own opinion is that they aren't the brightest strings, which, if you would like a more brighter sounding string, then, it's probably not the best for you. But if you like a warmer sounding string, these are probably the ones. Now, last for acoustic strings is the 12 strings, and the best strings for that are the Elixir 12 strings. This is gonna be rough. But anyway, they supposedly they bed in quick, which essentially means that they adjust to the guitar fairly quick. They don't sound kind of weird, I guess. I don't know, for me, I feel like right when I put the new strings on, it takes a few days to adjust to the way that I like them, but I guess these don't take that long. Also, they're elixirs, so they're coated. That means they're going to last longer and they're going to feel better, but with lasting longer, it means that you're not going to have to restring them as frequently. And if you like restringing strings, then, for acoustic, or for 6-string, it's really not too big of a deal. But for 12 strings, like even if you like restringing, it's kind of rough. So really the only downside to these strings is that they're elixir, so they're going to be expensive. But I'd be glad to pay more to have the strings last longer and me not have to go through the hassle of restringing a 12 string every so often. Okay, so now that we're done with acoustic, that means we got to go right into electric. Now first I'm just going to start with, my personal experience strings that I use and that I've experienced before, and then I'll go into the research just kind of like I did with the acoustic. And to start off, I'm going to start off with the D'Addario NYXLs. These are the strings that I have on all of my electrics. They're really versatile because they have a lighter gauge on the treble end, but kind of a medium gauge on the bass end. So with the lighter gauge on the treble end, I can do bends and soloing and that kind of stuff fairly easy. But then with the medium gauge and the bass end, I can do some rhythm and some, power chord kind of stuff with that. Also, they also last a long time, especially for not being coated. So they also with not being coated, they feel really nice. The one thing that I kind of feel like for me is kind of a love-hate relationship kind of deal, and that's when, kind of like how I was talking about how they sound weird when I first put them on, and that's that these sound really kind of twangy, I guess you could put it, when you first put them on. And on the love side, for my Strat and my Tele, I actually really like that, but like for my Les Paul and my SG, I kind of like a more warm, dead-sounding string, I guess. But that's really all just based on your personal preferences. Overall, they're a great string and I highly recommend them. Okay, so next up on this list, these other strings that I really love are the Gibson Vintage Reissue strings. These strings, I'm 99.99% certain that these were the strings that came on my SG, and I just can tell you right now, I love them. They sounded great from the day that I got the guitar to the day that I took the strings off. And they felt good on my fingers. They were versatile, I could do bends and stuff, kind of like the NYXLs. These are 1046s instead of 946s, so a little thicker, but still, I could do bends and stuff easy, I could do rhythm easy, and they were just overall great. They also lasted forever. I'm not kidding. I bought that guitar November 11th, 2023. I'll always remember that day. But I played that guitar all the time, like oftentimes for hours a day, and I still do. I love that guitar. But basically I play that guitar a lot. So I got the guitar in November, and then June of this year I took the strings off because I had a gig that weekend and I didn't want a string to break on me. Nope, a string didn't break on me, and that's why I restrung it. I just took the strings off because I didn't want a string to break on me. Like, they lasted forever. I don't know how much longer they would have lasted me, but they were great, and they're not coated that I know of, so I don't know what it is. I guess Gibson's just got something right over there. But anyway, another thing that I like about the Gibson strings over the NYXLs is that they don't have that twanginess at the beginning, like when you first put them on. So putting them right on my SG and my Les Paul, it'd sound fine. There's a lot that I could say about these strings, but basically to sum them up, I really like it, and if you play a Les Paul or SG or a guitar of that similar style, I would highly, highly recommend these strings for you. If you play something like a Strat or a Tele or something like that, they might not be the best strings for you, but you're welcome to try if you really want to. Now the rest of this is just based off of my research, and to start this off, the best overall strings according to Guitar World are the Ernie Ball Slinky 2223 strings. They claim to be durable and good sounding. The only thing that could potentially draw some people back is that they're coated, but that's really just kind of an opinion thing. If you like coated electric strings, then these might be the strings for you. I know one of my friends uses these and he loves them, so yeah. Next up on the list, the best coated strings are the Elixir OptiWeb strings. It's kind of a tongue twister, but I actually had these strings on my telly for a while before I switched them over to NYXLs, and I personally wasn't a huge fan of them. I don't know if it was just that I didn't play the guitar too often or what, but I don't know. I never really was a huge fan, and maybe I'll have to try them again and see how I feel about them, but yeah, for now, it's just the NYXLs. Anyway, let's just get into the stuff that Guitar World says about them. So first, they're extremely hard wearing and durable due to the coating. They also last longer than some strings, and they also, like I was talking about earlier, how some of the coating can impact your resonance and your sound. These strings aren't like that. They freely let your sound ring through. And really, the disadvantage is that they're pricier than some other strings, and maybe coated strings aren't the strings for you, but if they are, these are probably a good choice for you. Up next for durability is the D'Addario XT strings. Now these strings also happen to be coated, which some may like, some may not, but they claim that the coating isn't really too much different feel-wise as that of uncoated strings. So you get the benefits that you get with coated strings, but also the feel that you might like with normal non-coated strings. They also, being D'Addario, they have a wide variety of string gauges that will suit you best. And really the only negative thing about it is that maybe the coating could be too slippery for your preference, but again, it's kind of just a preference thing. That's kind of how a lot of this is. Now up next on this list, the best strings that they claim for Les Pauls and SGs and those kind of guitars, the Gibson Vintage Reissue strings. So I guess they really are good strings. But since I already talked about them earlier, I'm not really going to go into too much detail now, other than highly recommend them. And then up next again happens to be the D'Addario NYXLs, claiming to be the best for whammy. Now I'm not going to go into a ton of detail with these again. The one other thing that I do want to add that Guitar World has to say about them is that they are top tuning stability, and they're really good for whammy playing and stuff, which, with my Strat here, I have NYXLs on it, and if I just go, it's not a Floyd Rose, so if I go full dive bomb and, Eddie Van Halen kind of stuff, it's not the best tuning, but if I'm just kind of doing light vibrato kind of whammy stuff, it stays in tune fine. Yeah, other than that, I'm not really going to go into a ton of detail. Now the last strings I'm going to mention are the Ernie Ball Power Slinky 2220 off of one of Sweetwater's lists. And these strings seem to be pretty dang durable because these are the strings that James Hetfield from Metallica uses. And of course, being the king of downpicking, you would probably want some pretty durable strings. So basically, to sum this up, if you like Metallica, if you like downpicking, playing hard, that kind of stuff, the Ernie Ball Power Slinkies may just be the strings for you. Okay, and now for our last topic for today. How often should you change your strings? Now really, the real good answer for this is kind of just as whenever you feel like they don't sound as good as they used to, or maybe they don't feel as comfortable as they used to, if the strings corrode over time and they just kind of get less comfortable on your fingers, more rough feeling. So if that feels uncomfortable, then it's probably a good time to restring. Based on my personal experience, if you really want a time reference, I guess, I would recommend maybe every 2 to 4 months. Maybe that way you're not restringing, every month or anything and buying tons of strings, but it also gives you, keeps your strings at least fairly fresh. Another thing that I do is I typically will restring about 5 to 7 days before I have a gig if I've had the current strings that are on for a little while. That way I don't risk, breaking a string during the show or something like that. If you've had your strings on for a really long time, like maybe longer than a year or like a few years, then it'd probably be a good time to restring it. But if you think they still sound fine and feel comfortable, then you're probably good to keep them on. Now for some last little tips and stuff that I have for you, just to help you out with strings. So first, I would always recommend to keep an extra pack of strings on hand. That way, in case you like break a string at home while you're jamming or something, you don't have to go into the music store and buy a new pack of strings and then drive home and, put the new strings on. You can just break a string, restring it, and get back to playing. I always have 1 or 2 extra packs on hand just in case I break a string. Another thing I would recommend is if you have a guitar with a Floyd Rose, I would highly recommend finding a gauge that you like for that string, for that guitar, and stick with it. Because with a Floyd Rose, if you change the gauge all the time, then your bridge is just it's going to adjust, and you're going to want, every time that you change the gauge, you're going to have to get into the back panel of the guitar and adjust the springs, and then do that every single time you have to change the gauge, and it's just a hassle. So find a string that you like and keep it there. And yeah. Anyway, that'll be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching up to this point. And if you have any questions regarding strings down in the comments below, I'd be happy to answer them. Whether it's something more in depth about, like I was talking about in the intro, with the best strings for certain genres or anything like that, I'd be happy to answer. Also, if you have any suggestions for future videos or questions like that, I'd be happy to help down there. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. I really appreciate that. And I will see you in the next video.